Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of For Whom the Bell Tolls. It is the Bell Tower. I have to shout out to Jared Henderson for naming it the Bell Tower. Of course, I have to shout out Matt on Books for naming For Whom the Bell Tolls in the first place. If you are here live in chat, I want to thank you for being here. You guys are the life of the stream. If you're watching on replay, you know what to do. You've been here before. Drop it in the comments, hashtag Team Replay, and let me know where you're watching it from. It's always fun as new BellTube community members join us and they see that you guys are literally from all over planet Earth. So please do that. But tonight we are joined with somebody that I have watched as long as I've been watching BookTube. She is articulate. She is incredibly well read. She just emanates kindness and wisdom like nobody else, including you, Dr. Chase. So you're not the nicest guy on BookTube anymore, but here we are. I want to welcome in Johanna from Johanna Reads to For Whom the Bell Tolls. Johanna, please tell everybody how you are doing tonight.
Oh my gosh. I'm thrilled to be here on For Whom the Bell Tolls. So thank you so much, Brian, for having me. I've been so excited about this discussion. I know we're going to have a good time. And it's always just a pleasure to be a guest on anybody's live show. And I'm excited. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about and to hear from the chat as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so as you mentioned, Chad, I'm going to quickly scroll through a couple of quick hellos that we have here from our buddy Stepan in Croatia. And we just mentioned him. Since assassin elves are immortal, can the bell ever really toll for Silent Age? I don't know. This is a very good question. I mean, can't they die in battle? Shad, maybe. Hello. Not going to blame Alan for the stream starting late. Not sure how, but he's taking the Evie. We weren't that late. We were just hanging out backstage. And Christine, hello from the US. You're up late in Korea. Oh, he's talking to Stepan. And Matt is here. Hi. And Evie, hi, Brian. Hi, Johanna.
Hey, Evie.
And Dali Sue. That seems very, I'm going to guess French Canadian. And Pablo is all the way from Mexico. Excellent.
Oh, yay. Mexico.
Very cool. Well, I tell you what, if you guys have seen this show before, one of the things that I like to do when a guest comes on is go through their catalog a little bit. And we're going to talk about some of our newer videos. We're going to talk about some of the very first ones. But I want to ask a question right off the bat because it's already come up in the chat, courtesy of Dr. Chase. How did you get this nickname, the Elf Assassin?
I was trying to think back on when this started. It actually started with a channel who's not as active anymore, or hasn't been active for a long time. Gregory LaPerche. He actually commented on one of my videos recently, so I was remembering this. He had a conspiracy theory. He always had these conspiracy theories that he was going off on, and he had this conspiracy theory that I was secretly an elf because I never showed my ears in my video.
Oh, okay. This is making
And
sense in a tinfoil hat kind of way, but yes.
He's a tinfoil hat kind of person.
Okay.
And so then I ended up showing off my elf ears at one point, and somehow Philip from there decided that I was not just an elf, but that I am an assassin elf. And so I was very flattered when Philip referred to me as an elf, and it was also partly in conjunction to a tag I did where you're supposed to answer what kind of fantasy creature do you think you'd be, and I asked Philip, what do you think I would be? And he said an elf. And I was very flattered by that.
Until he wrote a book about elves and hopefully
exactly.
Not right. Yeah, I think he has to take that all back now.
I know. Isn't that rude? I was flattered until I read his book. I thought, wow, I thought we were friends.
Right? Deceiving. He said, he's tricky. Well, that's interesting because I always have everybody saying it's the elf assassins. And I'm thinking to myself, does she play Dungeons and Dragons? Is she an elf rogue assassin? Am I missing something here? It all makes sense now. It's the hair, it's the ears, it's Philip is involved in some ways. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So we're going to talk some booktube stuff tonight, folks. We're going to talk about one of our absolute mutual passions, which is music. And I'd like to ask you just right off the bat, because I legit don't know. I know you're a singer. Did you start singing early on in life? Were there instruments that you were playing at the same time? Can you tell us a little bit about your musical kind of upbringing?
Sure. Yeah. I unfortunately have never been into instrument playing. That's
Okay.
something I greatly regret because my siblings and my mother, my older two siblings and my mother played the piano. And I guess because piano lessons didn't really take off for my older siblings, my parents never put me in piano lessons, which I regretted later on because you have to know piano. You have to know some piano
Yeah.
as a musician. But I was into singing since I was 7 years old. The first time I saw my next door neighbor sing at a talent show, I realized I wanted to be a singer. And I found out she took voice lessons, and
Cool.
I was obsessed with the idea of taking voice lessons. I begged my mother over and over again. I even played with stuffed animals as a kid. I played with stuffed animals, and my stuffed animals would take voice lessons from each other as a kid. And
Okay. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
was playing with Star Wars figures and you were teaching stuffed animals how to have an ensemble.
Yes, yes, I was really into this idea, and then I never got voice lessons growing up. I think my mom there was just a lot going on. So then but I kept singing. I was singing nonstop, couldn't shut me up. And then in middle school, I kept on singing and singing, and my brother would tell me, "Oh, you're flat, you're sharp, you'll never get better, you sound terrible," because he was a musician. He was a trumpet player.
Your brother was?
Yeah, my brother is a trumpet player, my sister is a clarinetist,
Wow.
and I have another brother who's a guitarist. But yeah,
What a musical family.
I do
Oh
have a
my
musical
gosh.
family, yeah, and my
That
mother was
is
a really good
s
pianist.
that is so opposite of my family. I am the only musician, period, in, like, all sides of actually, my brother-in-law plays, but outside of that, I'm jealous in a way because wow, what a cool thing. You guys were almost like the Partridge Family growing
Oh,
up.
well, not quite, 'cause they my brother did criticize me all the time, and then I kept singing. I said, "No, I'll get better, I'll get better," and I kept singing, and my parents would say, "Yeah, Joanna, just keep it down, be quiet." And then one day I did sing for, I was into theater as well, and I sang for this voice lesson thing. It's a part of a theater thing, and, I performed in my first little solo in a recital, and
Do you
my
remember
mom
what you sang?
yes, I sang "Summertime" from Porgy
Okay,
and Bess,
okay.
and I
Isn't that
also
amazing how you can
sang
remember those, like,
yeah,
first, deals? Yeah,
yeah. I sang "Summertime" and I sang an art song called "Who'll Buy My Lavender," which had some higher notes for me at the time.
sure.
And my mother and grandmother were there in the audience, and they said, "I didn't know she could sing." So then my mother actually got me the voice lessons at that point, and then I kept singing ever since. So, yeah, that was how I got into it. But what music do you play? I know you've mentioned piano before on your channel, but
Yeah.
what's your
So
musical background?
So my music background is absolutely in piano. I am barely serviceable on guitar. If there's enough cocktails going around and someone hands me an acoustic guitar, I can, probably entertain for a little bit. But I started playing when I was 7,
Mhm.
piano. And it was just the weirdest thing because my grandfather had passed away and my mom got his piano. And so it was just sitting in the house and I was 7 and it was back in the 1920s. No, maybe I'm not that old, but it was definitely in the 70s, and there's no internet. There's not even cable TV, right? And children's television was basically Saturday morning cartoons, and that's it. So there just wasn't tons to do, but there was this piano there, and I absolutely fell in love with the songs of Elton John really, really young. And coincidentally, my mom had a friend who had a son that was in college that was in a rock band, and he, for side money, would teach piano lessons. And so he came over to my house. And basically, the reason why I think his method stuck with somebody like me was he just said, "What do you want to learn how to play?" I mean, there was the basic stuff you had to know first, right? Like scales and notes and how to read music and just fundamentals. But outside of that, unlike the experience that a lot of kids have when they start to learn an instrument, where they're handed, a typical music book to to get started with. And I've talked with Josh at Red Fury about this because he did have that very traditional musical education. My guy was in a rock band, says, "What do you want to learn how to play?" And I said, "Well, I want to play Elton John." And he says, "Okay, let's learn some Elton John." And then he was like, "And I think you can play this Barry Manilow song as well because it's in the same key." So we just started in pop music. I never looked back. Unfortunately, after a couple of years, he went off to law school in California. So I lost my piano teacher. But I've always kind of been the kind of person that if I fall in love with something, I don't need to be handheld. I'll figure it out for myself. And I was essentially self taught from probably about 9 years old, maybe 10 years old to today, where now it's great because there's YouTube. I can watch videos all day long and learn from expert pianists and what they're doing. And you can see the top view on how to play. So, yeah, that's a very long answer to your quick question of what do I play? And 100% piano. And I was in rock bands growing up and synthesizers, keyboards, all that good stuff.
So, have you read, Hyperion by
I
Dan Simmons?
have. I have. I love Hyperion.
'Cause I just finished that recently, and I was just talking about it on my wrap up that's coming up soon, but I got chills on the opening line of that book when the consul is playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C sharp minor.
Yeah.
I got so excited because I love that piece so much, and I was just
Yeah.
listening to it a week before.
Well, I mean, he starts that book off with, something out of left field that, to be honest with you, you're the less than 1% who have any idea what that piece is. It's a coin flip if any of them have heard of Rachmaninoff in the first place, but to specifically know that piece of music, you are for sure in the minority there. But yeah, very cool.
Well, the weird thing is I was just listening to that piece a week or 2 before, and I had played that piece in my Instagram stories because I love to
Okay.
play music in my Instagram stories.
Me
So I
too.
played that particular piece for my wrap up from the month before, where I had in the thumbnail, I had something like, "Are we doomed?" And I thought it had such a good, like, doom kind of feeling at the beginning, and I just love that piece so much. So I was so excited, and I got chills, and the idea of, like, the spaceship and the thunderstorm going on in this futuristic setting with Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C sharp minor, like, what a
Right.
way to win your way to my heart. I love that piece so much, but
Yeah. I mean, I think between those references and it's the Keats poetry, right? He's the
Mhm.
poet in that book. It's been a minute since I read it, but those are really kind of the two main old school references that Dan Simmons throws into that book. So, yeah, extremely cool.
I also
So,
have to ask you can I ask you one more
yeah,
question
of
really
course you
quickly?
could you
Sorry.
could this is a back and forth, and you
Okay,
know
good.
me, like I will answer anything. So, shoot.
This is just the most random question, but since you were
Yes.
talking about TV in the '70s,
Mhm.
I this was, a long time ago, but on public television, did you ever watch any shows on public television?
I think you mean like PBS?
Yeah, I think so.
So sure. I mean, Sesame Street, Mister Rogers, Electric Company was big in the 70s. What
I just
else?
wondered if you ever watched a show called The Letter People,
I've not heard of it.
a cartoon. Oh, you gotta check out Letter
The
People.
I'm
It
sure you
just
can.
came to my mind because I think I wanna say it was done in the '70s. It could have been the '80s. I don't know.
If it was the 80s, I probably didn't see it because by then I was already, trying to figure out how to get better at keyboards to meet girls. So yeah.
Yeah.
There's a motivation, folks, for lots of things, and that's certainly one of them. But yeah, so very cool. So you sang early on, you sang often. Did you sing obviously through high school as well?
Mhm,
Choir
yeah.
and what when you were in high school, what opportunities were there for you for singing?
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, I joined choir from 6th grade on,
Okay.
and I did improve quite a bit, in especially in middle school. At the end of middle school, I think is when my voice really started to develop, and I went through this weird period with my voice It went away, but for whatever reason, I went through this really strange period with my voice where my voice became enormous for my age, like, enormous. Like, it it was loud. It was really loud at the time. I somehow grew out of that. I don't know what happened, but development is weird. So
Sure,
I did, sing throughout high school. I was in the choir. I was in, like, the top choir there all 4 years. And I was always like the type of person in high school where I was really into art. I also developed my art skills during that time. And so I was theater, art, choir. Those were my subjects. I've never been the most academic student, at least back then. I was never that great at math. I was
sure.
not good at math. I was never a science. I was never good at science. Science was always so hard for me. I've never been that good at history, though I've had some good history teachers. So I've never been academically minded in that way, but I've always gravitated towards the arts.
That's so very right-brained upbringing for sure. Absolutely. That's incredible. I wanna say that if if you're able to compartmentalize different artistic things, I think they sort of feed off of each other and they can become synergistic later in life. So you mentioned that you were doing art. What, if I may ask, what kind of art? Are you painter, drawing, sculptor,
All of it,
all
all
of
of
it?
it. I should show you some I should bring up some of my art sometime. But
Yeah,
yeah, so I used to do little drawings all the time, and it was a very similar story with my art as it was with my singing, where I'd sing all the time and my family would be like, "Yeah, yeah, shut up." And then
right.
one day I'd sing at a recital and they're like, "What? I didn't know she could sing." And then same thing happened with art where I was constantly drawing. I'd say, "Mom, look at my art piece." And she's like, "Yeah, okay." And then one day I took art class in high school, and I don't know what happened. There was like a switch that happened in my brain, and I did this portrait. I did a portrait of Trent Reznor, the singer of Million Inch
Awesome.
Nails. It's this
Awesome.
massive portrait that I
I'm
still
gonna interrupt you and just say in the
go
last
ahead.
5 minutes, we've talked about Trent Reznor and Rachmaninoff. So you know where this conversation's going, folks.
Yeah.
Please continue.
So I actually sold that piece for like $200.
Awesome.
Yeah, I got I don't know what happened, but I suddenly found I could draw really, really well, and to the point where I actually majored in, art in college for a semester. It didn't last, but I grew really into art. But yes, I do all types of different kinds of art. I had an amazing art teacher in high school too, incredible teacher. He was the kind of teacher who would risk getting fired in order to teach you a lesson as long as you learned. I mean, he was so good. He was the best. I love that man so much to this day. Still love that guy. But yeah, so I did painting. I've never gotten into oil paintings. That's a deficit I have. I just never had the opportunity to get into it. But I love doing watercolor, gouache painting. I did a lot of portrait sketching, even just in number two pencil.
Sure.
And sadly, I've given away a lot of my best work, I feel like. But yeah, I've done digital art. I started getting into digital art about 10 years ago. I have a cousin who is a professional comic book artist, graphic
Oh,
artist.
wow.
He's incredible. He's so good, and he gave me a lot of tips. But and I started doing more art this summer too. I started doing digital art again, but I'm very rusty at it. I'm extremely rusty at it. It's something that I guess I need to work on again. But sadly, like I will say, I'll be honest, BookTube has kind of hacked into my creative time. I think if I weren't doing BookTube, I honestly think I would be doing a lot more creative art or like a lot more art, a lot more, yeah, just a lot more creative endeavors.
Absolutely. I can wholeheartedly agree with you because that has happened to me specifically. I was pre-booked to playing at least an hour piano a day, forever.
Amazing.
And after I started the channel, I just kind of started playing when I could get some extra time in. And it's tough because I don't know, maybe you can tell me, but is art sort of like th playing an instrument where if you don't use it, you will lose it for a period of time in terms of like skill level, and I call it chops when I'm playing, piano, and if I don't play for a while, I will certainly lose my chops at it.
I I don't know. I think so a little bit.
Okay.
For me, that's been the case to some degree, but at the same time, I think even when I look back at the work that I've done that I've been very proud of, it's taken a long time. Like, every piece that I'm really proud of has taken hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. So, I don't know. Yes, I do think, at least for me, in my case, I have noticed that I have gotten rusty from not doing it as often. At the same time, my mother, she started picking up art for the first time when she was in her 50s, I think,
Okay, cool.
and she is incredible at it. She's a very gifted artist, and she never knew beforehand. She just started in her 50s and seemed to have the skill naturally. So
That's awesome.
I don't really know how that works. It's a good
I
question.
I don't know either. For me, it might just be a me thing. But yeah, absolutely. So trying to trying to segue slightly here into booktube because you mentioned it, and it's obviously something we both have a passion for. You've been doing it a little bit longer than I have. So let me ask you, and I gonna ask it in a different way. Normally, I ask people what inspired them to start a booktube channel, but today I went back and watched your very first video. And in it, I learned that Johanna had put somewhere on a Discord, and maybe you can let us know which Discord it was, that if her channel received 5 whole subscribers, she would make a video. And lo and behold, she exceeds expectations one more time and gets 6 subscribers and thus had to make a video. How did that feel the first time you turned that camera on and you were like, I'm actually going to do this?
That's a good question, and thank you so much for telling the story because I've told
Yeah.
it so many times. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that you researched that. I've just kept that video up because it's so funny to me. But, I don't remember exactly what went through my head when I was answering the questions. I thought it was fun to answer the questions, I think, and I remember being nervous and excited. So it was just a balance, I think, between being nervous, being excited. Um, I think there was just a combination of those feelings. To this day, though, I still feel that way a little bit when I post a video. I still feel a little bit of anxiety sometimes right before I post a video, but I also feel this rush of, like, excitement the second that
Mhm.
it's posted. Like, "Yes, it's posted. Wow." I gave birth to something. There's
Right.
this weird high that you get when you
I
post a
I
video.
th I think there is a dopamine high when you
Yes.
post a video. Particularly, I think we happen to have a very supportive corner of BookTube that we hang out in, and I think you see probably some of the same faces that I do in the comments that are generally very encouraging, if not always encouraging, which definitely adds a little bit of, I don't think the word is self-esteem, but it gives you a little bit of proof that what you think is okay, other people also think is okay. And I think that helps wanting to continue. And booktube is really hard. I think that people underestimate how challenging it can actually be. So yeah, kudos on you pointing out the kind of the feel good endorphins that come with posting something, because yeah, it's a creation, and with the internet, literally there's people in the chat right now from all parts of the planet. I mean, you can have an impact on people that, yeah, you really don't know. And I believe that these impacts have tendrils and they out throughout the world. And if you do it in a kind, in a good way, we are absolutely making some kind of a positive difference with our channels, because I think that they're both pretty positive energy. You don't see a whole lot of rant videos on Johanna Reads, I don't think.
Aw, thank you. I love that about your channel too. One of the things that I really love about you is not only are you passionate and excited to talk about books and you are very well read, clearly you come with a wealth of experience when it comes to reading fantasy, but you're also somebody who likes to have fun and not take themselves too seriously. And I value that quality in somebody tremendously. So
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. You had asked me earlier about your audio. It dipped a little bit a couple of times there, but not horrible. So just
thank you
bear
for
in
letting
mind.
me know. If it continues,
Yeah.
let me know and I'll unplug and plug in.
Yeah. And chat, if for some reason, if I miss it and John's audio kind of comes in and out, please let us know in the comments and we will take care of it. So, yeah, thank you so much for that compliment. I try to have fun. It was really one of the goals that I set forth when making this channel is that I wanted it to do it, my way, in whichever nonsensical, weird way that might be. It had to be fun for me to do it too, or I would just be like every other channel out there. And that just isn't me. I've kind of got to be my own animal when it comes to the things that I do. So thank you for noticing that. It definitely makes a big difference. When you started reading fantasy, I think in one of your older videos, and I am going to put this up here. Long live disco, absolutely. And by the way, Funky Mirage is right around the corner. So, and all right, Frank Sinatra, yeah, my way. Um, so I noticed in one of your videos that you talked about that it took you a little while to get into fantasy again. Um, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, just in case somebody hasn't seen that particular video, when you started reading fantasy and the kind of the break that you had, and then maybe when you went back to it.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to remember exactly which break because there have been a couple. I,
Sure.
I started reading fantasy when I was a teenager, and my introduction to fantasy was The Hobbit by
Hmm.
Tolkien. And then I made my way into Lord of the Rings. I did not finish Lord of the Rings, sadly, when I was a teenager. I made it all the way till the beginning of Return of the King, and I went through a major reading slump at that time. And part of
Okay.
it, I think, was due to like checking books out at the library, so they weren't around all the time. And then I bounced in and out of fantasy. So I read things like Piers Anthony and Elric and David Eddings, books like that, just
Sure.
here and there based on friends' recommendations. And then I think I just went through a hard time keeping my focus with when it came to reading for pleasure in
Sure.
those years. I think that's kind of typical. I don't know. I didn't really read a lot of fiction anyway. I read a lot more nonfiction. I think during my early adulthood, and then at one point I just missed reading. And what happened was I kept having dreams, and I still have these dreams now and then. I kept having dreams that I was reading a fantasy book. And every time I had the dream that I was reading a fantasy book, like the wonder and awe and joy would come up in me, like the feelings that you get just from reading fantasy.
Yeah.
I kept on waking up and I kept thinking, I need to read again. I want to read fantasy again because I just missed that feeling. I know this feeling. And so my dreams are what led me down that path to pick up books again. And at the time, I think the Song of Ice and Fire or the Game of Thrones show was
Sure.
being announced. And at the time, I was in a relationship with a guy and one of our longtime friends, he and
It wasn't King Joffrey, was it?
exactly. So,
It
it
was
was
this explains the trauma, folks. I mean,
gosh.
come on.
Yeah, I had 2 guy friends, though, at a party. I still have a picture of that party too, it's kinda funny, but, they were just basically going on and on about A Song of Ice and Fire because they were long time A Song of Ice and Fire fans. They said, "We hate Martin, but it's so good, but we hate Martin." And I'm like, "Why do you hate Martin?" "Because he takes so long between books." And this was right after A Dance with Dragon was published.
Sure.
He was getting so much hate from my friends, love hate, because they
Yeah.
were so frustrated with how long he took between books. So I went ahead and started a Game of Thrones before seeing the show, and then I was so surprised. I thought it would be way too difficult for me. I thought it
Mhm.
would be I was scared, honestly, getting into fantasy that way, and I was just hooked. I was so hooked. I was so into it. And from there, I did continue reading. I got into Dune from there. I read a lot of classic sci-fi around that time. And then I went through another long, long reading slump that I didn't get out of until like 2017, 2018. So yeah,
Sure.
I've had a couple of long, long reading slumps. It's something that it's been a challenge for me throughout my life, honestly, where I want to
Gotcha.
read, but then I just can't make myself do it.
Sure. Well, I hope when it happens again, if it ever happens again, um, you'll have some, I guess, experience with it. So if you do decide to take a break from reading, then you can mitigate the time that you break for and don't make it too long. I
Mhm.
was watching one of your videos and you were talking about regrets in that I think you had read the Gunslinger and then basically put down the Dark Tower series because the Gunslinger was just okay for you. And you were like, gosh, I should have just pushed on because the drawing of the three was so incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think part of the problem then was I was getting that was when I was getting out of my reading slump and starting to pick up fantasy again. But I think the fantasy I was craving at that time was more the traditional medieval fantasy, like castles and dragons, that kind of fantasy.
Sure.
And so when my brother actually went, I come from a family of King fans as well. And
Okay.
one of my brothers is a longtime King fan. And he has been trying to push the Dark Tower series on me for so many years. And finally, I picked up the Gunslinger, but he kept saying it was fantasy. So when I pictured fantasy, I kept picturing
Wizards and dragons. And
yeah,
yeah.
which you do get a little bit, but not
Yeah.
quite the same, especially in the Gunslinger.
Right.
So
Right.
so I was a bit thrown off by the Gunslinger when I first picked it up, but yes, I mean, it was so worth it to continue that series for me at least.
So when I watched that video, you had posted that maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Have you finished the Dark
Yes,
Tower?
I have. I have, yep.
Excellent.
Got a review on my channel and everything.
I okay, well, clearly I missed a video
Oh,
today, but I'm kidding, but
yeah.
I'm I hope you
Probably not a very
enjoyed
good
it
review.
as much as I did because it is a
Loved it.
top 5 series for me, for sure, especially because of some of the weirdness that he throws in towards the latter books that, I'm always one for the meta experience of reading, and when he kinda throws you outside of your own self a little bit, yeah, what a absolute brilliant, brilliant series. And I have to say that you talk about, well, you weren't fantastic in science or math or, the academic stuff, but yet when I take a look at Joanna's read list, okay, and the books that you discuss regularly on your channels and other streams, you are not reading intro to fantasy material. You are very well versed in Malazan. You are in our Scott Baker right now, I believe. You
Loved
are
it.
in Janny Wirt's Wars of Light and Shadow right now, I believe. This is top tier difficulty level fantasy. So, and even when you talked about some classic sci-fi stuff, that's not for the faint of heart either if you really want to challenge your mind. So, it's interesting to me that while you may have this notion that math and the sciences weren't there for you, it's clearly not a matter of brain power
Oh,
because
thank you.
the things that you talk about on your channel and on other live streams, like I said, it's not the Hobbit. No offense to Tolkien, but this is some very complex, dense material. And to even be able to keep track of all of it is, kudos to you for sure, because you have a way of not only reading it, but articulating your thoughts, feelings, vibes, experiences with it, like very, very few other booktubers are able to do. So that's just more of a compliment, I think, than a question. It's outstanding. And I think that that makes you, very unique in the booktube sphere. So that's just a compliment, I think.
I'm very humbled by that compliment. Thank you so much. Uh, I do I do love being intellectually stimulated, I'll be honest. I am a nerd in that sense, and thank you, Jared. That's very I think. I don't feel like I'm very highbrow, but I did, I have had a passion for a long time, for philosophy. I'm not good at philosophy. Don't come to my channel for philosophy, go to Jared Henderson's channel for
There's a guy
philosophy.
right here, folks.
Yes, he
He
is a
named this
philosophy
the
nut.
bell tower. Go to his stuff. He's awesome.
He is. I love his stuff. I love learning about it. I'm not very well read when it comes to philosophy, but I did find myself getting really interested in it in college,
Same.
and so I love books that challenge belief systems or especially I think ethics. Ethics is fascinating to me in fantasy, especially. So I do love authors who challenge my beliefs or challenge my thoughts about things or challenge our worldviews in some ways. So I do crave that. That's something I crave. And that is definitely distinguishes me as nerdy. I even in conversations, I love having conversations, like really, really deep conversations with people,
Sure.
finding I don't know, so that kind of stuff is what makes me tick, even though I wouldn't consider myself very good at science or math or any of those subjects. Yeah, I guess I can say I'm a little nerdy in some ways.
I think in the best possible way. I really do. And yeah, I share your passion for philosophy as well. There's a video dropping tomorrow on Dr. Chase's channel where I talk a little bit about my passion for philosophy and my experiences with it in college. But yeah, just it's fascinating stuff. And I think the more we read some of these fantasy books that not only are written by people in America or England, but really from all over the world, and we get different aspects and different ways of thinking that really are outside of our norms. It expands the philosophical questions, I think, even deeper just in the diversity of it all. So, yeah, I agree with you there. Can you tell us about a book in particular, or maybe a series that you feel like had some either profound impact on you as a person, or maybe even changed your perspective on a way of thinking that, you've read something and then maybe you shifted a little bit? Or maybe, or if not shifted, that just really hit you hard, impactful impact wise.
Oh, well, I mean, I feel like it's gonna be an obvious answer, but, Molassen Book of the Fallen, like, that series really emotionally got to me. I know people always talk about it as being complicated and hard to read, and all of these descriptions are very prevalent on BookTube, but I emotionally engaged with those stories. I emotionally engaged with what the characters were experiencing, and that is, I think, the key to being able to identify themes in story is what are the characters? What are the conflicts that the characters are experiencing? And in that particular series, I love the whole entire series. The last book, The Crippled God, is my favorite book. That is my favorite book of the whole series. Possibly one of my favorite books of all time. I cannot describe the book hangover I had from that
That
book. I
that
still get
I mean,
emotional over it.
well, let me how long did it take you to pick up another book after The Cripple God?
I mean, I kept reading because I just forced I okay,
Sure.
so something I haven't told you is that when I got out of my last reading slump of several years ago,
Okay.
I got out of that reading slump by reading a minimum of 5 minutes a day or
Sure.
a page a day. That was how I got out of it. I
That's
just forced
smart.
myself. I said, that's the minimum. It doesn't matter how I feel. I just have to check this off. If I go by just emotions with my routines or with my yeah, with my rituals, with my routines, with my habits, if I just go by emotions, I'm not going to do things. So I have to kind of set up a routine in that sense. Like I have to make a check, you did it. Check, you did it. Kind of habit tracker sort of thing
Sure.
approach. So that was how I got out of my reading slump. And so I have, even after The Crippled God, even as emotionally distraught as I was, as much as I wanted to go back and reread the whole series, as soon as I
Right.
finished Crippled God, I was on a plane going home. I remember it was New Year's Eve and I was flying back home from vacation with my family or seeing my family. And all I could think of is I want to go back and start over again. I want to read Gardens of the Moon, but I didn't. I had to continue going on with other series and other books I'd put off because I'd sacrificed so much of my TBR beforehand. But
Sure. I mean, but I've only had the serious book hangover a couple of times. One of them we had talked about earlier, and that's After the Dark Tower. And it wasn't because it that I didn't like the conclusion. I actually happened to love the conclusion. But it felt like I had been on this journey with Roland for a really long time. And I wasn't ready to let go of Roland and the quartet and move on to another cast of characters. It just I wanted to hang out with them more. The same kind of happened with me when I finished Assassin's Fate, which is the last book in Realm of the Elderlings. I think I didn't read for a month after that because I just was so just felt such comfort in that world that I wasn't ready to get into another one yet. But Interesting. How do you pick the books that you read? Is it and has it changed since you've started BookTube? I would imagine to some extent it has because you've got lots of BookTube friends that probably know your tastes a little bit. But maybe if you could share with us, how does something end up in on Johanna's TBR, and what determines how quickly it ascends to the next book?
That's a really good question. It's a really good question. I think it really does. I mean, obviously, I pick up books largely because of BookTube. I think that we all do, and I think the more compelling the book sounds based on what somebody has to say about it, the more I want to pick it up. I I'm trying to think though. That's a really good question. I've noticed that this is something that's changed about me since I started BookTube. I feel like the quality of the writing is far more important to me than it used to be. It's so much more important to me than it used to be when I first started BookTube. And when I say quality of the writing, I don't feel like I need prose to be dense. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily need it to be dense or rich or lyrical, but it has to have something going for it. I do look for a strong authorial voice. I do look for impact with the prose, emotional impact or visual descriptions. That's important to me as well. Something that's very immersive. And I do love rich settings as well. That's something I struggle with is I really struggle to pick up dystopian novels, which is why I
Sure.
have not read more Octavia Butler, which is a big regret for me. I need to read more Octavia Butler. But I
Okay.
do struggle when it comes to dystopian. Um, so I think that those things are very important to me, and then friends do play a role.
Sure.
I was thinking about making a video about this at some point with their permission if they'd let me, but I was thinking about making a video at some point about who has influenced me to pick up the most books since I started BookTube, whether it is Murphy, because Murphy has actually influenced me to pick up a lot of books even before I started my channel, or Jimmy, who
Sure.
Jimmy has definitely had a huge impact on my TBR because I
Yeah.
think Jimmy and I have very, very similar taste in books. And Alan, though
Sure.
Alan will feel betrayed if I don't say it's him. And then, and then,
Do not get a holy war cast upon thee.
yeah, and Philip Chase. And I have to
Yeah.
say, by the way, speaking of Alan, I couldn't believe he revealed that he didn't like Oi. He's an Oi hater from
Right?
the Dark Tower.
I mean, I'll say this for Alan. He is honest as they get. He's not fearful of, basically dissing an animal companion that 99.9% of the people that read The Dark Tower absolutely love. Alan he'll tell you what he thinks about it.
Yeah.
But
Oh, and Evie too. Evie has had a huge influence on my TBR too. She's gifted me a few books, and I buddy read a few books with her. So she's also been a big influence. And I feel like Evie and I tend to align. And here and there we've
sure.
disagreed about some books, but we have aligned quite a bit.
But I think that that's so important because your initial answer to the question, I love, though I would say that you won't know about some of those aspects, like the strong authorial voice and all of that, until you actually read the book to know. So it'd be hard to decide if this is going to be next up on your TBR, unless either A, you've read that author before, you already have a confidence in that author, or like you said, other booktubers who you align with, they go, oh, this is right up Johanna's alley. This would be perfect for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's mysterious to me. Sometimes I do get in the mood for something that's like cozy of all things. I don't pick up a lot of cozy books, but every once in a while I do crave something like that or
Sure.
something. I don't know, just something a little different, and I crave novelty. Novels in the word novelty, but I crave a lot of I crave different things, so I do read
Mhm.
different genres. I read a lot more different genres than I did when I started my channel as well. I
I
find that
think it's really important, especially
Mhm.
given some of those series that we just talked about. If you're reading Wars of Light and Shadow and you've, relatively recently finished Malazan and you're into some of these denser, richer books. I mean, I can tell from personal experience. Yeah, Evie's saying it right here, balance. I talked about that in the video last week that I did a horrible job about that. I've been reading dense to dense to dense to dense to dense, and to the point that not that my passion for reading has changed, but it's become a little bit more like work. And
Mhm.
I've really looked at my July TBR and said, all right, this is going to be a fun month and terrific. And if I happen to be reading books that people care about, great. If I don't, then come August when I'm reading stuff that the channel cares about more, terrific. Hopefully they'll still be there, but I don't think that I'm any good to anybody just breaking my brain for the most part on consistently challenging material. And I'm glad to know that you've come to that decision already too, that there's a good time to put in those kind of cozy comfort types of reads or to break up the genre a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, right now I am reading R. Scott Baker's The White Luck Warrior, which is book 2 in Aspect Emperor, and it's phenomenal. It's amazing, but it does require me to slow down and to read very carefully. And at the same time, I am listening to the audiobook of Lonesome Dove. And I'm only in the early parts of Lonesome Dove. I'm listening to it very, very slowly. And it's feeling very I know there are heavy things in store in this book. I know that.
Yep.
But it's feeling very cozy in comparison to R. Scott Baker right now. Oh,
Absolutely. I'll read this one out loud in case anybody's just listening. Sometimes that happens. Jared Henderson says, Johanna, you should try Omar El Akkad's American War. It gets shelved with literary fiction, but it is near future climate dystopia that's reminiscent of some of Butler's work.
right.
I learned the reading out loud part from Jimmy, by the way, speaking of Jimmy, because so many people listen to these rather than watch them on replay. They actually listen like a podcast. And if you don't read the questions, people don't have context as much. Also saying hi to Madison, who just popped into the chat. We love her.
Madison. Yeah.
Lonesome Dove is great. I mean, it was my book of the year last year. And uh, you would have never thought in a million years. My mom ended up reading it just right after me, and it was great because it was something we could, chat about together. But yeah, lots and lots of fun. So I'm trying to find where I was on my list here. Oh yes, so we talked a little bit about Erickson and Wirtz. They're clearly favorites of yours. Who are some other favorite fantasy or science fiction authors that you have? And can you point to anything specifically why them as authors resonate with you?
Mm. So, science fiction fantasy, we're just sticking to SFF.
You can go anywhere
So
you want, really.
sure, I'm just kinda looking at my shelf through the camera right now. So, I clearly love Dune by Frank Herbert. I've
Sure.
read the first 3 Dune books. I haven't read God Emperor of Dune. I do wanna read that at some point, but I felt very satisfied with those first 3 books as an arc, and I think that that particular series is very special. It was very monumental for me as well in the sense that, like, it's just so it does what sci-fi I think does best, which is give you this sense of when it can give you something a large scope, like, give you a sense of the macro and the micro. I think it's done so well in that particular series and tying in together, uh, all types of important themes and so many important I don't know, so many important characters in that story too that I
Sure.
love. I love that series so much. So that has been close to my heart. There's just nothing that's made me feel quite like Dune until Aspect Temper, and I'm starting to
Right.
get the kind of feelings that I got from Dune in Aspect Temper, even though that's fantasy. But
Sure.
I'm also loving R. Scott Baker's writing. His writing is it's so sophisticated, and at the same time, it feels like it doesn't try to draw too much attention to itself. So, like, whereas another author, they might come up with a really incredible line and then they emphasize it by setting it aside with, as its own paragraph or italicizing it. I feel like you could read Baker's prose and you just see these incredibly well-written sentences, these incredible quotable lines that are just in the flow
In
of
the
the
in the in the flow of it. So
yeah.
that to me sounds a little bit like what we might get with a Janny Wirtz or a Guy Gavriel Kay,
I love
where
them
you're
too.
just in the middle of a random paragraph and it's the best sentence you've read in a year. And it really that's pretty crazy. Whoop, did my camera kind of freeze a little bit?
It's a little tiny bit,
Hopefully it's gosh, I
So,
don't know what's
hope that
going
can
on. I'm on an older laptop, folks, and sometimes this has been happening lately. I don't know. Happened over on Philip's channel over the weekend, but hopefully it'll resolve. And as long as you guys can hear me okay, I think that that's most important. It certainly is not worth cutting in and cutting out of the stream. I don't think. Has this just been kind of just starting just now?
it just started just now. Just it
Okay.
started, like, a second before you pointed it out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it'll resolve itself. And if not, well, I'll just put up Japanese subtitles and we'll just confuse everybody. So, absolutely. How do you approach creating content on your channel? Like, what what do you when you sit down, and the reason why I ask is because tags used to be super popular, 2 3 years ago, even maybe a year ago, and then they kind of went extinct for about the last year. But I noticed that you did quite a few tags, and those are fun to do. How do you approach deciding what you want to make for a video outside of, you get tagged and it's relatively simple to do because somebody's sort of written the script, where when you do your own video, you have to basically start to finish, it's all you. What goes into that for you? Like what's your process?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's something that I have been brainstorming for myself lately, like what I'm doing with my channel. I like to reassess now and then where I'm going, what I'm doing. And I guess I don't know where I just I don't really have a good answer for that. Um, I just usually get an idea and run with it.
Very cool. So,
That's
but in other words, like there are some YouTubers that will spend all kinds of time scripting, what they want to do, and there are some that are just more naturally just come on and start talking. I feel like in that regard, you're very similar to Mike in that you can come on and just talk, and it doesn't seem highly edited at all. I think you're pretty dang good at expressing your thoughts kind of the first time through, or am I revealing behind the curtain? Is there a lot of editing or not too much?
I mean, I do edit my videos. I don't
Sure.
do it all in one take, so I
Okay.
do, cut out the ums and ahs and
Yeah.
and I do have to organize my thoughts. I don't script my videos. I
Okay.
think yeah, and I have tried lately, but even though I don't script my videos, I have questioned whether I should because I feel like I could be more organized sometimes, and I'm very critical of myself, so I often will watch my videos and think I could have expanded more here or there, or at least I used to feel that way. I think I've gotten a lot better this last year about talking about books, but yeah, I mostly just bullet point these time make bullet points these days, and I think the other thing too is this year I've tried to put more emphasis on books more than anything. I've done some videos that are a little bit more topic videos,
Sure.
but I do wanna bring up more topic videos because those are my favorite kind of videos to watch, honestly.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite kind of videos to create sometimes. But yeah, it's just that's basically my format. I usually try to list some bullet points and then talk about the books I've read.
That's exactly what I do. So we are simpatico on that. I think that's the word. I don't know. But yeah, that's exactly what I do. Have you noticed, and again, sometimes these questions kind of come out of nowhere, and they're almost like on the spot type of questions that I fully understand. Given an hour to think about it, you'd probably have more of an answer to this particular one. But have you noticed any common themes or motifs in the SFF books that you read that particularly stand out?
Okay, froze for a second there, so I barely caught what you said. I think you said
Sure.
that you were looking for
Have you
themes,
noticed any,
motifs?
like, common themes or motifs in the fantasy and sci-fi books that you read that stand out to you from book to book or series to series that are thematically common that really work for you?
Wow, let me think about that. So I did a video, this earlier this year, called 10 Things I'm Loving in Books Right Now. I'm
Okay,
trying to remember what those were. I'm trying to remember what some of those were. I know I talked about, um I'm trying to remember what those were. I can't even remember. I know I talked a lot about how much I've enjoyed, I obviously enjoy song when song is used in a story. I enjoy, um I'm trying to think. I mean, there are various little things that I enjoy in stories. I've noticed that this is gonna sound like a weird answer,
Mhm.
but I actually enjoy when writers are able to write conflict, not just internal conflict, but conflict between characters really well. And not just characters that are enemies or at odds with each other, but characters who are family members. I think Stephen King is so good at doing that, by the way. Or
Yeah.
characters who are, or characters who are friends, like banter, that kind of thing. I really appreciate that.
That
I
the realistic side of it, right? Where it doesn't seem like it's just an info dump conversation just to get information out, but something people would actually be talking about together.
Yes, yes, absolutely agree with that. I know when, I know when.
Yeah.
So I think a common theme or motif that I gravitate towards is when we emphasize a character who seems like somebody you wouldn't necessarily remember in real life or zoom in on in real life, and you notice that they have ripple effects on those around them, or that what they do matters, that their story matters. So one of my favorite non-fantasy stories of all time is Stoner by John Williams. And so Stoner is the story of an English college professor who is noted as being maybe an unremarkable, unrememberable type of person by those around him. Um, he's not really remembered after he dies that much, and then that's given away, by the way, in the very opening of the book.
Sure.
But I found him such a fascinating character. I just I felt so much for this character and his inner conflicts. So I think that that's important to me, just understanding that even the everyday person, even the person that you think might not matter or might not be the big superhero, might have ripple effects on others, whether you realize it or not. That we all live bigger lives than we know.
I totally agree, 100%. And I think that in some regard, just even the tone of your videos matters because, like I said, you come across generally kind and wanting people to enjoy the fact that they clicked on your video. And if that puts a smile on someone's face and they happen to smile at somebody else later that day that they may not have otherwise, just because they're in a better mood. They might not be specifically even thinking about that video. It ripple effects. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That's
very
beautifully that thank you for saying that. What about you though? Are there any common themes or motifs that you gravitate towards as a reader?
I find myself a big fan of the hero's journey. I think that that could be anything from Lord of the Rings to the Dark Tower to Realm of the Elderlings, where we have literally an entire life of a hero's journey. That really does work for me. Same with the Wheel of Time with the hero's journey. And I know the scholar author Joseph Campbell, who's real big on mythology, has talked about the hero's journey being one of the oldest um what's the word that I'm looking for, tropes, I guess, that there is in storytelling. But yeah, that for me is really really good. I like when there are authors that legitimately have a good sense of humor and can put it into their books. It's one of the reasons why the First Law universe for me is one of my all-time favorite series, because as bleak and as miserable and as just everything that could go wrong does go wrong for most of those characters, you still find yourself literally laughing out loud every other page. So that's definitely something that I look for. That again, sometimes you don't know till you read the book, right? Like I wouldn't look at if I picked up the blade itself in a bookstore. And I go into all my books blind for the most part. I don't read the blurbs. I don't read the back cover. I don't read any of it. So I wouldn't know that it was going to be funny. All I would know is that it's grimdark. So I think in some regard, BookTube is huge in that because it helps identify some of these common things that I know that I personally resonate with. Same with you. If you like lyrical prose and you've got people like, a Jake Bishop out there talking about Guy Gavriel Kay all the time,
Mm,
um,
okay, so good.
that just, inspires you to go pick it up. already knowing that there's probably going to be something in that book that works great for you, regardless of the characters, regardless of the specificity of the plot. Um, just stylistically, it's going to be in there. So, yeah,
Yes. I love what you said because I totally agree. I love Abercrombie's humor. And I'll be honest, it's interesting that you bring that up as something that you gravitate towards or a motif or a theme that you gravitate towards because I do not gravitate towards a book. That's one thing that I don't pick up a book for. If somebody says, pick up this book because it's funny, I
yeah,
usually am thinking, I don't, I'll pass.
yeah,
But it was just a huge benefit side effect, I guess,
right,
or bonus. It was a huge
sure,
bonus. That's the word I'm looking for. It was a huge bonus that First Law was so hilarious,
yeah,
but it's also incredible at doing so many things too. I love
yeah.
Abercrombie's writing style. I love his prose. I love his humor. I love his characters, and I love character psychology too. And I feel like he does such a good job of making his characters very believably flawed and then putting them in situations where they're tested to the max with whatever fatal personality flaw they have. So,
Absolutely, and they all do. I mean,
yes,
every character in that universe is basically a matter of how flawed are they rather than are they flawed. I mean,
yes.
it's just basically a big scale. You talk about funny books, have you read any of Discworld or of any of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide?
Yes, I have. I read, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and unpopular opinion, I thought I was just okay about it. I
Sure.
didn't I wasn't crazy about it. My husband loves it, though. He
Yeah,
loves that book, and I know there are a lot of fans. It just wasn't really my thing, and that's why I've always been like, "Well, I don't know about humorous books." I tend to like them, but not necessarily on the level of other people. So I
right.
was thrilled that I loved Abercrombie so much. But yeah, I read that, and then with Discworld, I really loved, Guards. I did
Yes,
laugh
I'm here.
aloud several times when reading that book,
Yeah.
and I did read Men at Arms. That's the second one in that
Yep.
series. Yes, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed Guards more, but
Okay.
I enjoyed Men at Arms quite a bit. I thought it was
Yeah.
funny. I do need to continue that series.
Same here. Feet of
Mhm.
Clay is next for me.
Yeah.
So that's on there. It's interesting. Do you, when you like decide to watch a movie, does that sort of translate into like your movie or TV taste as well, where you're more on the drama side than on the comedy side?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm thinking the most recent thing I rewatched the whole entire, anime Death Note. I don't know if you know that
Okay. I
anime at
don't.
all.
I don't.
So good, and it's free on YouTube. You can watch
Okay.
every single episode for free on YouTube,
Very
but
cool.
it's interesting because it is slightly different than my reading taste in that it does rely on a very hard magic system, and I'm not necessarily into hard magic systems right now in my reading life,
It seems
but
like that is a very, very popular opinion lately on BookTube. It's like
so
everybody was super Sandersonian for a while, and now everybody's going back to the Gandalf years. So,
yes.
yeah.
Part of it might be because I read so much Sanderson so many years ago, so I've needed
Mhm.
a break from that, but I love Death Note, I love the magic system in Death Note. Hey, Laura. I think Laura would enjoy Death Note possibly, and that I even though it's really kinda dark, at the same time, I feel like there is a sardonic humor to Death Note that I love, so I
Sure.
do love a kinda dark sardonic humor at times, um, and I'm trying to think of other shows that I've been into. Oddly, so I talked about how every once in a while I'm in a cozy mood. I've been really into Studio Ghibli films over the last year, and that has its own aesthetic of whimsical wonder, coziness, and it also has a funny there is an interesting kind of humor, a little quirky humor, a little bit of absurdity in his stories, but I love those films so much, so
I haven't seen them, but now you're adding to my to-do list. So,
Yes, you need to watch, maybe Spirited Away, that's my
okay.
husband's favorite, he's watched it several times. That's usually most people's favorite is Spirited Away. I would say maybe start there.
I can do that. Do you think we were talking about this a little bit earlier when you're talking about lyricism in books.
Mm.
Do you think that music can play a role in enhancing the storytelling experience, even in a literary way?
Did in A Song for Our Bond, which is my favorite book of last year.
Okay.
Yes, have you read
Ex
that one?
It's on my list. I just picked up the book let's see, last month. So, again, July is sort of my light reading month, but
Mm.
I suspect A Song for Our Bone will be, I don't know, maybe August, maybe September. I just did The Lions of Valrasan about 2 months ago, and I'd read Tagana last year, so I already know I'm a huge fan.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So A Song for Aman, he inserts song. And not only is there song in the book, but song plays a very integral role in the storyline. It plays a very integral role in the political plot of that book. And it plays an important emotional role for the characters. You talked about loving the hero's journey.
Yeah,
That's something that I love about Kay's books. It's not necessarily the hero's journey itself, but it's also the virtues or ideals of heroicism that he's able to bring through the lyricism of his prose. He gets you to feel that aspirational inspiration that you can only I don't know, that I associate with fantasy. But I feel like
sure.
Kay has a gift for bringing that out, for making you feel inspired and motivated. Whereas I don't think that would work in a modern setting, in a modern book, but it works in a medieval setting and it works in
Right.
Kay's
It
words and
it'd be
prose.
strange to have an urban fantasy book with all of a sudden a bard song going off in the middle of a bar somewhere.
Yes. Well, you'll find that inspiration though in Kay's books. I think he's just such a gifted author when it comes
And
to
and
that.
and I have to be honest, prior to BookTube, and I know you're going to come at me, and for sure
Mhm.
Philip will come at me about this. Honestly, when I would see song lyrics in a book, I'd glaze over 'em. I don't think that that's an uncommon thing, but as I've become more familiar with some of the talent level and why of the authors and why they're putting those lyrics in the way that they are, and it's even in Philip's books as well, that I realized that they're really just as important as the story itself. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be there. So that is something kind of new to me, but I'm glad that you knew that right off the jump for sure. Have Let's talk about your booktube community a little bit because you've done lots of videos, you've been on lots of group collaborations. How has just the general community, say outside of other booktubers, had an impact on you?
The general community outside I
Yeah,
see what
like
you
just
mean. So
mostly like
non-channel. Yeah.
just mostly like viewers, people that tune into your videos, people that tune into your collab conversations. How have they impacted you as a person? Because I think that when we get started, I know when I first got started with this, it was in some regard a little bit, John Minton's talked about this before, that you just want to be part of the club. You see these personalities on YouTube and you just want to be able to chat with them and get to know them, as friends. But what I have found is that is absolutely valid and terrific. But the amount of people that are viewers, I actually interact with way more. And it's been extremely meaningful to me as a community. So I'm just wondering if you felt and had similar experiences with that, just because you've been doing this a little bit longer than I have.
It means a lot to me. There is something special about that. I totally agree with you. It's very special to me to interact with people, especially those. I mean, I love interacting with other people in the community. Hey, Theo, hello.
Look who, you know what? I mean, here's a great example. I just subbed to his channel today. I didn't, how was I supposed to know you
That's okay.
guys?
You couldn't know. You couldn't know.
He's awesome.
He's
So
the
yeah.
best. I'm so glad that you subscribed to him because
Of
he's
course. No,
wonderful.
I feel like, in some regard, and I don't want to get you off your answer, but I feel like in some regard, him and I have some things in common. So
Yes.
who knows? Maybe the bell will toll for Theo at some point in the future. But so I interrupted you.
Oh, no, you're
What were
fine.
we talking? We were talking about the
We're talking about,
community. Community.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah. I It makes my heart sing because especially this last year, because this year in particular, I have felt, a little bit nervous about some of not nervous, that's not the right word. I'm trying to think of the right word. I'm trying to think of the right way to put this, but a lot of my channel has not focused this last year on the most hyped books on BookTube. That's the best way I could put it. I've been just reading what I wanna read, and a lot of the books I've been reading and talking about on my channel, like I said, they're not the most talked about books, they're not the most hyped books, and so I always feel like I'm taking a chance whenever I put out a video on the books
Sure.
I read, knowing that that's not gonna necessarily generate a lot of viewership, and it means the world to me whenever I have people commenting in my comment section and they say, I love that you read different kinds of genres, or I love that you talk about books that other people haven't talked about, or I love this author, or I love this book. And I think, you know about this book? You've read this
Yeah.
book. And it makes me so excited that there's somebody out there who can connect with me about these books that I don't feel like are talked. And I'm not trying to say I'm better than other people or anything like that for talking about books that other people aren't talking about or anything like that. I want people to just enjoy what they read. It doesn't matter if a book's hyped
Absolutely.
or not. It doesn't matter if a book's one if it's One Piece and that floats your boat, go for it. But
Right.
like I have been reading, like I said, a lot of books that I don't think are gonna ever rise me up the algorithm, and, I guess that's a sacrifice I'm making, and so the qualitative feedback from the comment section from the viewers, it just means the world to me.
It's
That's
so
why I
validating though. I mean, it
Mhm.
really is because yeah, there's definitely the voice in the back of your head going, "Who's gonna watch this video?" And, like, so when you watch a book review video or a video talking about a specific book, do you tend to watch it before reading that book or after?
Good question. Um, it depends on how in-depth the review is or the analysis is. If Okay, here's my answer to this. If it's a review of a book that I have not read and that I don't have as an immediate TBR goal, then I'll probably watch the video. I'll
Sure.
probably watch it. But if it's a book that I'm about to pick up or I know I'm going to pick it up this year, then I might refrain from it. And it also depends on how in-depth that review goes or how general the review goes. If it's the person just saying whether they enjoyed it or not, that's pretty safe, I think. But if it's something I'm about to pick up, then I kind of want to try to avoid a full review about the book so I could just go in with my own thoughts.
Yeah, I totally agree, and the reason why I mention it is because when you talk about viewership and you're talking about a particular book, I think those videos tend to be a little bit more evergreen. And if you're watching, evergreen just means that
Mhm.
they get views over time, whereas, say, just a random weekly update of what you happen to read that week, probably 3 years from now, no one's going to care what I read this week, here in July of 2024. But if I happen to be talking about Cloud Atlas, and 3 years from now, somebody wants to find out about Cloud Atlas. First of all, they're going to turn into Jimmy's channel. And then, after they get through four more channels, then they might watch me. But I think that to your point about the viewership, that may come just later, when it comes to actual reviews. I don't watch any book reviews ever unless I've read the book. And then it's just a matter of, do I agree with what this person, felt about it or not? And, for the most part, generally speaking, I do. I find that I don't want to say that I want to surround myself with channels to subscribe to that I think just totally align with me. But I started just by watching all of you guys. So the reason why I subbed to all of your channels is because the book recommendations were so good. So by just that fact alone, I know that my tastes are going to align a lot of the times, with some of those people. Anyway, I was I we were talking about community, but I do have a different question, and I think that with the advent now of and yeah, Laura, I definitely agree with your ACOTAR opinions. I'm going to refer counsel to, evidence, let's say 17B, which is Alan's couch in his old garage, when he did his vlog on ACOTAR, and I will leave it there. Um, what was I talking? Oh, I was talking about independent publishing for a second, and only in the regard that it has really opened up the floodgates of the amount of fantasy and science fiction and probably literary fiction. Just to be honest, I don't pay that much attention to that genre, so I don't know, but I'm going to assume it's probably similar there. What do you think makes a book truly stand out in what is an increasingly crowded field of options to choose from?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think the number one thing people are looking for is a book that gives you, I think you nailed it earlier actually when you were talking about the things that you're looking for in a book. It's something that gives you a wide emotional range or makes you just feel something very, very powerfully. Whether it makes you cry or it makes you happy, I think that's what people are looking for. They want to be emotionally engaged with what they're reading.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great answer, and even to the people that are watching this now or on replay, we do have some budding authors that are really serious about trying to put out a book, whether it be self-published or shop it around to a traditional publisher. I think your answer is really key. You can't write vanilla. You can't write so bland that it doesn't stand out in a crowd. It doesn't, need to be completely, at 11 on a scale from 1 to 10 on all aspects, but I think it's worth, just reminding budding authors sometimes that it is a crowded field and it's only going to get a little bit more crowded, and to do things that make your material stand out a little bit in the genre can only be helpful. And I think when I say it, it's one thing. I think when you say it, it's wiser. I don't know why you have the wise vibe. I'm just the dude in the unkempt tie over here. But yeah, so where was I here? Um let's talk about booktube for a second, because I know that you've probably been asked this question before, but maybe some of our viewers haven't seen this. And as a matter of fact, I saw somebody earlier in the comments ask this, and that is, there are many people that realize, I'd like to try doing a booktube channel. I This kind of seems fun to me. Wait till you find out, by the way. Oh my god. Don't, no, I'm kidding. It's fun. But if if someone comes to you for advice, what are a few things that come to top of mind for you, at least as you've experienced it, that you could point to for maybe some do's and don'ts? That if you were talking to Joanna 3 or 4 years ago, who's just about to get started, what kind of advice do you have?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think you kinda just have to do it. I know that sounds like the most trite, cliche answer, but I think when you're starting any endeavor or any activity, some people like you, like, for example, you're amazing. Like, you came out of the gates and you're professional looking, you have an amazing setup behind you. I know you recently updated your
Yeah.
background, but it
I
still
hope
looks incredible.
I hope it's better. I don't know ever. I'm gonna probably do a community poll and ask them, if they like this new setup better or the old one. I don't know. But continue, please.
Yeah, and you have, like, a nice microphone. I mean, you're doing it all right. It looks, like, very nice, very professional. For me, I just used my MacBook Air camera, and so I'm all pixelated, and the mic was my MacBook mic, I think, so it's really bad audio, and I had a kind of a messy background behind, so maybe don't follow my advice. There are a ton of channels out there on YouTube, though, that offer advice for people who are starting a channel and can give
Mhm.
them tips, can give them advice about budget-friendly gear. I still feel like the tech side of things is not my strong suit. And when it comes to talking on camera, I think it's just gonna be awkward. It's still kind of awkward for me, honestly. I feel like I'm more at ease talking in a conversation like this than
Sure.
talking alone on camera, but it does get easier too. I mean, I think you
Mhm.
could probably attest to that too. It's definitely easier than the first time. But I think asking yourself, "Am I any good?" I think that's almost the wrong question when you start out. Like, you just have to accept that you are where you are and that you're gonna get better one step at a time. And so I guess that would be my advice, and I know the hard part about YouTube, and this was the part that I was scared of when I started my channel, and the number one reason that maybe held me back, well, there were a lot of reasons that held me back, honestly, is the emphasis on numbers, the whole number game.
Mhm.
And so what I did, and I don't know if this would help people or not, but what I did is I tried really hard when I started my channel. when I entered YouTube Studio, which is where you go to see
Mhm.
all your comments, whenever I'd enter YouTube Studio, I wouldn't look at the analytics at all, and I probably am at fault for not looking at that stuff enough, but I would just go straight to the comment section. I
Sure.
would focus on qualitative feedback, which are comments,
Mhm.
and not look at numbers, because if I look at numbers, that could just, that can send you down a dark path, unfortunately.
It can, and, you know, this is sort of like an algorithm-based business model, and we can only control what we can control. We can control the content that we make, and thank you, by the way, for your compliments on the professional look that I started with. Honestly, for anybody who's watching this, you don't need to do professional. You can do iPhone, you can do laptop. It doesn't matter. But I will say, I knew nothing about any of this prior to doing this. I knew nothing about lighting other than lighting up a nightclub, which is totally different than lighting up my living room to have a live stream. But I didn't know anything about it, video editing, and I just learned it all over the course of a couple of weeks prior to launching the channel, just watching YouTube videos. So I think to your point, there are plenty of great instructional videos that can help somebody who's nervous about the technical side of actually making a video. Like, because I think that it's probably there's probably three things there. There's the technical concerns that somebody might have. There's the content concerns that somebody might have, like what will I even talk about? And then there's just the self-esteem factor going, well, what if nobody likes me? Or, what if nobody cares what I have to say? And the truth is that that part you can't control at all. So I would throw that one way out the door. The technical stuff you can learn online, and the content stuff, I agree with Johanna. Talk about what you're passionate about. Talk about what you like to discuss with others and have conversations. And just because you're talking to a camera, you're talking to, potentially hundreds or thousands of people at a clip. So love that answer.
Okay,
Are
good. I hope.
are are there any, and I'm sure there are there any upcoming books that you're particularly excited about that are either on your TBR or kind of on a new release schedule that you are pretty anxious to get to?
Let's see. On my TBR, I'm very excited to get to the Dandelion Dynasty. I just finished reading Ken Liu's short story collection, The
Is
Paper
that the paper
Menagerie and
menagerie? Yeah.
Adventure. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I read that alongside Kyle, who was in the chat, and Evie, who's in the chat, and Bookborn, and the 3 of them were rereading that collection. I was reading it for the first time,
Sure.
but I had such a good time reading that collection of short stories, and I am just hyped now. I'm really hyped for reading the Dandelion Dynasty. I'm hyped for finishing Aspect Emperor. Of course, I'm in the middle of an 11-book fantasy series right now,
Right. Right.
Pillars of Light and Shadow. So that is taking up that's eating up a huge part of my TBR. But I'm also really excited to continue with Guy Gabriel Kay. I'm going to be picking up the Sarantine Mosaic this fall.
So that's 2
And
books at
yeah,
least. I mean,
books.
but, it's like, when we think about fantasy and it's only a duology, I mean, that's pretty good. That's
Yeah,
not too
yeah,
bad, yeah.
that's true. That's true. I do appreciate that Kay does write so many standalones, though, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, so I have not read Dandelion Dynasty, but do you feel like it might be difficult to read that while you're have an ongoing, Wars of Light and Shadow read going on?
I think it'll be okay.
Okay.
I think I'm okay if I have, like, 2 going right now with Aspect Emperor after this book, which I'm hoping I'll finish within the next week. I I'll only have 2 more books in that, or Philip and I will only have 2 more books in the Aspect Emperor to finish off, and then we'll close off all of the Second Apocalypse series. So that's very exciting. It's a
Yes.
7-book series. And then aside but yeah, I think if I have 1 or 2 series going while I'm reading Words of Light and Shadow, I think I should be okay. And I finished the Edan trilogy finally. So that's closed off.
Mhm.
But
Isn't that a great feeling when you finish a series? I mean,
yeah,
it's like it's the good and the bad, right? I mean, we don't want it to end, but there's definitely a sense of accomplishment, particularly if it's longer than a trilogy.
100%. There is something really amazing about finishing a series. I
Yeah.
got that feeling. I got such a endorphin high from
Sure.
finishing the Malazan Book of the Fallen a couple years ago that since then I've tried really hard to make it a priority to finish series and not put too many on the table at the same time. So I want to, yeah, I want to make sure that I'm sticking to that plan, but it is unfortunately the reason why I have not yet gotten to more Robin Hobb, your
Yeah.
favorite author. I have not gotten to more in the realm of the Elderlings yet.
Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, we have to pick and choose our battles to some
Yeah.
degree, and it's like you're looking at a 16 book series there. And then you're also, you're looking at if somebody hadn't read Wheel of Time, you're looking at a 14 book series and they're not short books. And if you're thinking about Malazan, they are 10 books, but they're some of those things are 2 books. And so you could make a case that Malazan's really 16 or 17 books just in page count alone. It gets a little bit tricky. Oh, there's Derry. She was here somewhere.
Yeah.
Derry's here. Gotta
And
say hi. Hey, there.
Gary, and I saw Kevin was in the chat earlier
Yep.
too.
Kev's late, so he doesn't get any fruit cup. Now, if anybody gets that reference, by the way, throw it in the comments. John Minton, you're gonna get that when you watch this on replay. I suspect nobody else will. Maybe my mom and my dad will. Anyway,
And do I
um,
understand correctly that you and John are gonna be reading Words of Light and Shadow next year? Is that
we
right?
are. We are. And yes, we are. True story. So John and I decided we're going to read Wars, Light, and Shadow next year. And I just started Gardens of the Moon a couple of months ago. And my plan was I was going to read a Malazan book once a month till I finish off the series. And then I was going to start um, Wars of Light and Shadow after that. John came on and said, we're starting in January on one of his shows. And it was definitely news to me. So I'm like, all right, so I guess we're starting that in January. But I went to, oh my God, Evie knew it. Come on. Come on, Evie.
Nice job, Evie.
I should know better than that. Um, but I don't even remember what I was saying. I was so blown away that Evie actually knew that. But
You
yeah,
started
so
you started the
we're
last
talking.
one and
Yeah, so
then
I was going to do Malazan first, but I asked both Philip and Jimmy, and I suppose I can ask you as well. What's a good stopping place in the 10 book series if I have to take an extended break to do the Wars of Light and Shadow? Jimmy thought through book 4 would be sufficient. I think Philip sort of agreed as well.
that's a good I would agree with that because book 2 so it feels to me like book 3 it continues an arc from book 1, and then book 4 feels like a sequel to book 2. So
Perfect.
and then book 5 starts on a totally different continent with a totally different cast of characters. So yes, that's the best answer. Read up
Book
until
4. So yeah, that'll definitely be my plan. Do you read the Stormlight Archives, Brandon Sanderson?
Yes, I've actually read a lot of Sanderson. I read a ton of Sanderson before I started my channel,
Okay.
and, I finished Rhythm of War actually right before starting my channel, which
Really?
probably was my least favorite of
Same
the
here.
Starlight
Same here.
Archives
I think
for
that's a
many
pretty
reasons.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty common opinion on that series. It just felt like it could be 3 or 400 pages less than it was. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so Wind and Truth is coming out this year.
I think I need to pick it up. I just don't know if I'll immediately jump to it. Maybe. I know everybody's gonna be jumping into it, but
Oh, there's no doubt.
mm,
There'll be about a 2 to 3 week span on BookTube of just a million. That's all anybody's going to be talking about. And there'll be people that get it on audiobook that are, listening at 3
3
times
times
speed
speed.
just to get a review out, as quickly as possible for our buddy the algo. But yeah, I don't know. Kev says definitely read through House of Chains. Is that book 4?
Yeah, that's book 4.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Perfect,
Great
perfect,
idea.
perfect.
Definitely do that. Mhm.
Book 4 wouldn't take a break, so much to remember. Yeah, but there's also the internet, and I can go on to channels like Johanna Reads, and I can go on to channels like Dr. Philip Chase or the Fantasy Network and probably get breakdowns of whatever I forget in the time that I step away from the series. And yeah, I'm with Jared on this one. It is I gave it 4 snores. So he's right on the fact that it is a bit of a snooze fest.
Yeah.
So folks, I promised Joanna that we were going to stick to about an hour and a half tonight, and we've kind of hit that mark. So before we, thank everybody and all of that good stuff, and I forgot to even tell Joanna that we do this, but hopefully she's seen enough episodes of For Whom the Bell Tolls that this doesn't come as a total shock and surprise. And I will give her a moment to think about it as I think the chat. But generally speaking, on all my videos, we do a one for the road. And I like to just give any thought I can to maybe help improve the day or the life or the mood or the person or impart some kind of thing to think about moving forward. And when we do our live streams, it's just really awesome that our guests are given the opportunity, I think, to provide the one for the road for the day. And I hope I've given Joanna enough time in the last 25 seconds because I generally tell people this beforehand, and I apologize. And if it's not something that you can do off the top of your head, that's okay. I can do it myself. But if there was like some kind of like a one for the road message that you would like to share with the people who are watching this either live or later on team replay that you think might be meaningful to them in any regard at all. It could be just as something as simple as be nice to people. What would be your one for the road today?
Hmm. I have like my first thought. Honestly, this is just the
Sure.
first off the top.
Sometimes that's the best. Sometimes I'm better off not telling people they're going to do this, and then it forces just an urgency of answer, and the right answer comes.
This is gonna sound weird, but I was gonna say drink tea. This isn't tea though, this is water. But I
Okay,
was gonna say drink tea because or drink something warm, maybe warm water, and hold it in your hands. And I think that that can kind of give you a sense of calm and grounding. And the thing that's also coming to my mind with that is I was reading, and I don't know how true this is or not, but I read in a book that there was a study in which people who were holding a warm drink when they met another person and they shook hands that the person would perceive them as being a warmer individual because they were holding a warm drink, like
sure.
a hands are warmer. But if they were holding a cold drink, then they would perceive the person as being cold in nature if their hand was cold.
I believe that.
But I also was thinking about this recently too, because I used to be a big coffee drinker. I don't really drink coffee anymore. I'm more a matcha person. But I do have always loved going to coffee shops. I've always loved drinking something hot. And I've always just found that for me personally, as someone who's a bit of an anxious person,
Sure.
holding something warm in my hands is just very grounding and calming. So even if it's just hot water, maybe that's a good tip somebody would want to take with them.
I
Maybe
I
that's one for the
I
road.
I love that, and let me tell you, um, like I said, there's an urgency of answer sometimes when I throw a question out that you may not be expecting, and that's the most practical and probably best answer I've had on this channel yet.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Because it's nothing to take away from any of our other guests, one for the roads, because they all were great and they all were important. But this is something tangible that is practical that I believe a lot of people read, specifically science fiction and fantasy, because on some level there's a bit of an escapism and you can go be someone else or be somewhere else. And I've just noticed as a lifelong reader that many of my fellow readers have certain anxieties that are, it's okay to talk about because we read about them in books all the time. It'd be weird if the only people that had anxieties were our characters in our books. We do too. And I think what you've just provided us, and I believe that readers, in particularly in this genre, deal with anxieties quite a bit. And that is practical, it's useful, it's meaningful. And I will absolutely take what you just said to heart because I do drink coffee, but I drink it in the morning early, and then that's it for me for the rest of the day. And I have noticed that if I have tea in the afternoon and holding that warm teacup, it is calming. It is grounding. Awesome answer.
Oh,
Complete,
thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
completely awesome answer. So, of course, I want to thank Joanna for being here tonight. Obviously, I am almost positive everybody who's watching this is subscribed to her channel. On the other hand, if you might be the outlier, if you're that one person that is not yet subscribed to her channel, the link is in the description. You should absolutely do it. Now, I have to thank everybody who's been here in live chat. You are the life of the chat as well. I want to thank everybody who's watching this on replay. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully my camera worked for most of it. I think there was probably still is a little bit of jumping around, but hopefully that was okay. And of course, I have to talk about next week on the channel. So we have an all new episode next week on For Whom the Bell Tolls. It's going to be at the exact same time as tonight. And we have a guest that many of you are familiar with. She's been in the chat all night long tonight. There's going to be a thumbnail that comes out tomorrow, but next Wednesday night, we are welcoming to the bell tower. The bell will be tolling for the one and only Evie from
Yeah.
She Was Only Evie. We're going to be chit chatting. We have lots to talk about, but that's next week. Tonight, Johanna, it has been a privilege to have a one on one conversation with you. You are fantastic. You are everything that I have watched, throughout your collab streams and more. I'm hoping that you'd be willing to come back and be a repeat guest on the show sometime because you're just fantastic and your answers are just they're really really good.
Mutual Admiration Society here, Brian. It's been an honor, a pleasure to be a guest on your channel. I would love to come back sometime, and I'd love to have you on my Why Read discussion series at some point this fall. So,
I promise that if I haven't quit reading by then, I will absolutely come on the reading.
yay.
Everybody, thank you so much for watching this. You guys are just fantastic. There's going to be more great upcoming announcements on For Whom the Bell Tolls because we are booked out through the month of August. So we've got we've got a lot of great guests. Thank you guys. I'll see you next week. Have a great night, everybody.